The Escapist, Part 3. Bobby's wife, Carly, had a great heart. In the years after the Rippers were defeated, she became a pillar of Bobby's tiny farm community. She dragged him to work on community harvests, became a trusted mediator when tempers flared between neighbors, squabbling as they did over increasingly scarce resources and fighting harsh, unpredictable seasons. And when she found out about Terry's secret, she was overjoyed. Then when that secret killed him, she was as heartbroken as her husband, but nowhere near as broken as Bobby was when the same secret killed her too. "Arthur!" Bobby put his fingers in his mouth and whistled high and shrill. Arthur's ears pricked up and he put on the brakes. He turned around in the waist-high undergrowth between the trees, giving up the chase of whatever critter was hiding in the brush. The acres of straight rows of trees had been mostly reclaimed by brown scrub brush in the last decade. Younger trees had sprouted willy-nilly in the gaps, but there was no missing the rows Terry had planted while Bobby was off at college in the years before the Rippers. Dead center in the middle of the field, several rows of the tallest, oldest trees were missing. The scraggly brown undergrowth and reaching branches of new trees covered a deep furrow, scarring the middle of the field of straight lines. At the bottom of the overgrown tear was a small wooden shed. With his dog barreling towards him, Bobby turned and unlocked the padlock on the shed's double doors. Dust motes swirled inside, shook up when Bobby pulled the doors wide, and glittering in the throw of light across the floor. A bench ran along the far side of the square wooden structure. Barrels, a wheelbarrow, and lengths of garden hose dotted the floor to the left. Gas-powered tools were hung on the wall to the right, behind stacks of milk crates filled with assorted farm craft. Neat and tidy, just the way Terry liked it. The only thing out of place in the shed was a dirty canvas knapsack laying in a heap on the floor. Bobby turned at the sound of his dog chewing up the yellowing ground cover. He stepped out of the shed and bent over, slapping his thighs. Arthur trotted over, sniffing his hands and expecting a treat. "Maybe on the other end, boy," Bobby murmured. Used to the routine, which had begun before he was born, Arthur padded happily into the shed. Bobby, on the other hand, took a few steps away from the shed and looked slowly around. He took a good minute to stare hard over 360 degrees of space. Nothing moved that wasn't pushed by the dry, hot wind. Bobby nodded and turned back to the shed. Inside, he closed the doors and with a grunt hefted a 3x6 board out of the corner. He dropped the hard maple board behind a line of metal brackets running across both doors at waist height. In the dim light of ventilation grates high on the shed walls, he gave the barricaded door a shake. It didn't budge. Satisfied, Bobby turned to see Arthur already sniffing the floorboards with his nose. He laughed, rubbing the dog by the scruff, then peering in the half-light for the knothole in one of the floor planks. He knelt, slipped his finger in, and grunted as he raised the solid wood plank a few inches. He stuck his other hand beneath and walked the 6-inch plank up and over to lean on its side against the milk crates along the side wall of the shed. He raised 4 more boards up before jumping into the shallow hole in the earth beneath. His feet clanged against the familiar metal something hidden below. Arthur's claws clacked against the floorboards as he paced beside the hole. "Settle down," he chuckled, but he knew how the dog felt. He never quite got over the excitement of making a run either. He reached under the plank still in place behind the hole, finding and tugging out the cloth-wrapped bundle hidden there. He unwrapped the ends, sat the bundle on the floor behind the hole, and unrolled it. Inside was a collar and leash for Arthur, a worn brown leather wallet, a small tin, and several thin, iridescent metal rods. He opened the tin and dug out a handful of coins. They went in his right front jeans pocket. He opened the old wallet and counted the bills inside, then slipped it in his right back pocket. "Hurruff!" Arthur's stutter barked at the sight of the canine accessories and pranced in the dim light. Bobby collected the leash and collar, shaking his head at the dog. "You won't let me tie you up any other damn time, but I can slip a leash onto your neck no problem for a run." Arthur, being a dog, said nothing, just leaned his neck over the side of the hole to poke his nose eagerly into the collar Bobby slipped on. Bobby wrapped the leash around his palm and gently gathered the scruff of Arthur's neck with his hand. Feeling the warmth of the German shepherd's skin against his own, Bobby pursed his lips and considered the several thin rods. He reached out and slid his palm and fingers over each, rolling them over the cloth and considering their length. He remembered little Irene's smiles as she and her siblings put a dent in his strawberry supply, and decided on a longer run. He grasped one of the longer rods, lifting it and feeling as always the unnatural heat emanating from the alien metal. Idly, he scuffed his feet over the object hidden below the floorboards and a thin coating of dirt. The same iridescent sheen of metal he was standing on gleamed as his foot cleared away a small circle of dirt covering it. "Yeah," he murmured, looking at the long rod. "It's market day." Arthur barked again as Bobby raised his arm and the rod above his head. Sure to hold his dog tight by the neck, gritting his teeth, he swung the rod down and struck the metal. When the rod impacted metal in the ground, there was a spark and a glow rippled on the surface beneath his feet. The glow brightened, the bright spot expanding and disappearing beneath the dirt like ripples on water. And Bobby's brains, guts, skin, eyeballs, all of him shook with the vibration triggered by the impact of rod and metal. It became painful. His heart beat faster. Arthur yelped joyously again, seemingly unaffected, just before the shed around them winked out of existence. Around man and dog there were now only trees. A perfect grid of healthy trees, unblemished by the corpse of a downed alien war machine, or a shed erected to hide just such a thing. Bobby turned around, and there in the sky, where the massive Ripper ship towered, was a big, blessed nothing. Rubbing his nose in the ground, Arthur sneezed like he always did at the start of a run. The dog sneezed again and again, finally shaking off the fit with a nose-to-tail shake. Bobby lifted his hand, playing out the leash and breathing deep as the last of his own trembling faded. Almost faded. After the shaking passed, the bone-deep vibration was still there, deep in his bones like a countdown clock, which Bobby thought, gritting his teeth against the unsettling but very familiar sensation, it was. He looked all around the field. It was empty as usual. The sun was high in the sky, long past the time his father would have scouted out the field. He closed his eyes and took in the scent. Green, fresh, more humid than it was in the broken version of the world that he called home. He wondered where on this farm his father was right now. He doubted he would ever have the courage to go find out. This wasn't really his world, and that Terry Charter wasn't really his father. The trick with the rods and the chunk of Ripper ship Terry had built a shed around to hide only lasted as long as the vibrations making his bones itch and his teeth chatter. If a body used one of the long rods, like Bobby had today, that vibration would last for hours. It might be long enough to find an older alternate universe version of your dead father, but it sure as hell wasn't long enough to explain anything at all. Still, he stared wistfully in the direction of the barn and house. But he knew there was no trick to ease the grief of his father's unceremonious death at the hands of a mob. No, Bobby would just have to settle for filling his knapsack and easing the pain of his neighbors back home. He turned toward the woods, walking away from the house where he'd been raised, eyes and mind focused on the city beyond, the city where he'd gone to school to escape his father, the city where he'd met Carly. His stomach growled, and he remembered the look on Greg Gilson's kid's face as they pillaged his fruit supply. A smile took over his frown as he thought of the strawberries that waited at the end of the road.